Before Christ walked on water, before Daniel faced lions, before David slayed giants, there was Job, a man whose story prophesies the greatest suffering servant of all time. What you're about to witness isn't just ancient history, it's a divine blueprint. Every tear Job shed, every prayer he cried, every moment of abandonment he felt echoes through eternity to Calvary's cross. This is the story that reveals God's heart when heaven seems silent, when prayers feel empty, when the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper. Job's ashes become the altar where human pain meets divine purpose. His resurrection from ruin foreshadows the ultimate victory over death itself. Prepare yourself. You're about to see the gospel hidden in the oldest book ever written. In the land of Uz lived a man whose name would echo through history. Job, chapter 1, opens with a description that seems almost too good to be true. Job was perfect and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. His wealth was absolutely staggering. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 pairs of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. His household was enormous, making him the greatest man among all the people of the East. But Job's true treasure wasn't his possessions, it was his family. 7 sons and 3 daughters filled his home with joy and laughter. These children loved each other deeply, taking turns hosting elaborate feasts in their homes. After each celebration, Job would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings for each of his children, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This he did regularly, showing a father's heart that constantly sought God's favor for his beloved family. Then something absolutely incredible happened that would change everything forever. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came among them. When God asked Satan where he had come from, Satan answered that he had been walking back and forth on the earth, roaming throughout it. Then God said something that would alter the course of history. "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth? A blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?" Satan's response cut straight to the heart of every question about faith and suffering that has ever been asked. Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now, stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord's answer would shock anyone who is listening. Behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on his person. In that single moment, a cosmic wager began that would test the very foundations of faith itself. The first test came swiftly and brutally, like a series of devastating hammer blows. In a single horrific day, messengers ran to Job with news that completely shattered his world. The Sabaeans had attacked and stolen his oxen and donkeys, killing his servants with the edge of the sword. Fire from heaven had burned up his sheep and more servants, consuming them completely. The Chaldeans had formed 3 bands, raided his camels, and killed even more of his people with brutal efficiency. But the worst news of all came last. A great wind from across the wilderness had struck the house, where all his children were feasting together, and the house collapsed, killing every single one of them. Job's response was absolutely remarkable and completely unexpected. He tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell to the ground in worship, saying these unforgettable words, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all this devastating loss, Job did not sin nor charge God with doing anything wrong, but Satan wasn't finished with his assault. Chapter 2 shows him returning to God's presence once again. When God pointed out that Job still held fast to his integrity despite being moved to destroy him without any cause, Satan's reply was absolutely chilling. "Skin for skin, yes. All that a man has, he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face. God gave Satan permission to touch Job's body directly, with just one important condition. He must spare Job's life. Satan immediately struck Job with painful boils, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job sat among the ashes and scraped himself with a piece of broken pottery, trying to find some relief from the constant burning pain. Then came perhaps the most heartbreaking moment of the entire ordeal. Job's wife, watching her husband's unbearable agony day after day, spoke words that were born from her own desperate pain. "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." But Job answered her with words that have inspired countless sufferers throughout history. "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity?" In all this terrible suffering, Job did not sin with his lips. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the trouble that had come upon him, they made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and comfort him in his grief. But when they saw him from a distance, they could barely recognize the man they had known. They wept loudly, tore their robes, and sprinkled dust on their heads toward heaven. Then they sat with him on the ground for 7 full days and 7 long nights without speaking a single word to him, because they could see that his grief was extremely great. After 7 complete days of absolute silence, something finally broke deep inside Job's heart. Chapter 3 records words that shocked everyone who heard them and continue to shock readers today. Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth with language that was raw and desperate. These weren't the calm, measured words of a patient sufferer. They were the desperate cries of a man who had been pushed far beyond his breaking point. "May the day perish on which I was born, and the night in which it was said, 'A male child is conceived.'" Job's overwhelming pain poured out in vivid, almost frightening language that revealed the depth of his anguish. He wished that day had been complete darkness, that God above had not sought it out, that no light had ever shined upon it. He wanted darkness and the shadow of death to claim it completely, clouds to settle on it, and the blackness of the day to terrify it with overwhelming gloom. His words grew even more intense and desperate as he continued speaking about that night. "May that night be barren. May no joyful shout come into it. May those curse it who curse the day, those who are ready to arouse Leviathan. May the stars of its twilight be dark. May it look for light, but have none, and not see the dawning of the day, because it did not shut up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide sorrow from my eyes." But Job's deepest wish was actually much simpler and more heartbreaking than his dramatic curses. He wished with all his heart that he had died at birth. "Why did I not die at birth? Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? Why did the knees receive me, or why the breasts that I should nurse?" He painted a beautiful but tragic picture of death as a place of complete rest and peace, where the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary are at rest. The most painful and piercing question came at the very end of his lament. Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden and whom God has hedged in? The very hedge of divine protection that Satan had complained about in chapter 1 now felt like an inescapable prison to Job. His sighs came before his food each day, and his groaning poured out like water continuously. Job's explosive outburst was met with genuine concern from his first friend, Eliphaz the Temanite. Chapter 4 shows Eliphaz trying to be gentle and diplomatic at first, almost apologetic for daring to speak at such a sensitive time. "If one attempts a word with you, will you become weary? But who can withhold himself from speaking?" He reminded Job of how he had been a source of strength to others in the past. "Your words have upheld him who was stumbling, and you have strengthened the feeble knees. But now it comes upon you, and you are weary, it touches you and you are troubled." But then Eliphaz asked the crucial question that revealed exactly what he was thinking. Is not your reverence your confidence, and the integrity of your ways your hope? Remember now, whoever perished being innocent, or where were the upright ever cut off? In Eliphaz's theological worldview, suffering always indicated sin. Good righteous people simply didn't suffer like this without having done something wrong first. To support his point and give weight to his argument, Eliphaz shared something absolutely extraordinary, a supernatural vision that he claimed to have received directly from the spirit world. Now a word was secretly brought to me, and my ear received a whisper of it. In disquieting thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, fear came upon me and trembling, which made all my bones shake throughout my entire body. The vision itself was absolutely terrifying in its supernatural manifestation. Then a spirit passed before my face. The hair on my body stood up. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance clearly. A form was before my eyes. There was silence. Then I heard a voice saying, "Can a mortal be more righteous than God? Can a man be more pure than his Maker? If he puts no trust in his servants, if he charges his angels with error, how much more those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed before a moth?" The Spirit's message seemed to provide strong support for Eliphaz's belief that Job must have sinned. Even the angels aren't considered perfect in God's sight. So how much less are human beings who live in fragile houses of clay and can be crushed as easily as moths? Eliphaz was using this dramatic supernatural experience to suggest that Job's terrible suffering was clear proof that he wasn't nearly as righteous as he had always claimed to be. Eliphaz continued his lengthy speech in chapter 5 with what he sincerely thought was helpful and encouraging advice for his suffering friend. He painted a vivid picture of what inevitably happens to foolish and wicked people. "I have seen the fool taking root, but suddenly I cursed his dwelling place. His children are far from safety. They are crushed in the gate, and there is no deliverer. Because the hungry eat up his harvest, taking it even from the thorns, and a snare snatches their substance." But his main message was simple, direct, and meant to be encouraging. "Behold, happy is the man whom God corrects. Therefore do not despise the chastening of the Almighty. For he makes sore, but he binds up. He wounds, but his hands make whole." Eliphaz genuinely believed that Job's suffering was simply God's way of teaching him something important, a divine educational process that would ultimately benefit him greatly. He promised that if Job would seek God earnestly and make his prayer to the Almighty with a humble heart, absolutely everything would be restored to him and more. The restoration that Eliphaz described was incredibly beautiful and comprehensive. For he bruises, but he binds up. He wounds, but his hands make whole. He shall deliver you in 6 troubles, yes, in 7 no evil shall touch you. In famine he shall redeem you from death, and in war from the power of the sword. Eliphaz painted an amazing picture of complete security and divine protection. "You shall be hidden from the scourge of the tongue, and you shall not be afraid of destruction when it comes. You shall laugh at destruction and famine, and you shall not be afraid of the beasts of the earth. For you shall have a covenant with the stones of the field, and the beasts of the field shall be at peace with you." He promised that Job's tent would be secure, his dwelling completely safe, and when he visited his habitation, he would not sin. His descendants would be numerous like the grass of the earth. Job would come to his grave at a full age, like a sheaf of grain gathered in its proper season. Eliphaz ended his speech with complete confidence. "Behold, this we have searched out, it is true. Hear it, and know for yourself." Job's response in chapters 6 and 7 revealed just how deeply his friend's well-meaning words had actually hurt him. He began by wishing that his overwhelming grief could somehow be measured and weighed. "Oh, that my grief were fully weighed, and my calamity laid with it on the scales. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore, my words have been rash." His words seemed Extreme because his spirit was being crushed under this completely impossible weight of suffering. Job felt like God himself was directly attacking him with supernatural weapons. For the arrows of the Almighty are within me. My spirit drinks in their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. He wasn't complaining about nothing or being overly dramatic. Even wild animals don't cry out unless something is genuinely wrong. Does the wild donkey bray when it has grass, or does the ox low over its fodder? His overwhelming pain had made everything in life taste completely wrong to him. He couldn't eat because food had become absolutely disgusting. Can flavorless food be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? My soul refuses to touch them. They are as loathsome food to me. What he really wanted was simple, but completely impossible. Oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant me the thing that I long for, that it would please God to crush me, that he would loose his hand and cut me off. In chapter 7, Job turned his attention directly to God with some of the most brutally honest words ever spoken in prayer. He described all human life as constant warfare. Is there not a time of hard service for man on earth? Are not his days also like the days of a hired man? Like a servant who earnestly desires the shade, and like a hired man who eagerly looks for his wages. So I have been allotted months of futility, and wearisome nights have been appointed to me. His physical body was completely breaking down. My flesh is caked with worms and dust. My skin is cracked and breaks out afresh. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and are spent without hope. He reminded God that human life is incredibly brief. Like a breath that quickly disappears, whoever goes down to the grave doesn't come back up to see his house again. Then Job asked God a question that pierced straight to the heart of his complete confusion. What is man, that you should exalt him, that you should set your heart on him, that you should visit him every morning and test him every moment? How long? Will you not look away from me and let me alone till I swallow my saliva? He felt like God was watching him far too closely, testing him constantly and relentlessly. When Bildad the Shuhite finally spoke in chapter 8, his approach was completely different from Eliphaz's mystical, supernatural vision. Bildad relied heavily on traditional wisdom that had been carefully passed down through many generations. He started with a pointed question that must have stung Job deeply. How long will you speak these things, and the words of your mouth be like a strong wind? Bildad's theology was remarkably simple and absolutely direct. Does God subvert judgment, or does the Almighty pervert justice? In his mind, God was always completely fair and just in all his dealings. If Job's children had died so tragically, it could only be because they had sinned against God. If your sons have sinned against him, he has cast them away for their transgression. But Bildad did offer genuine hope if Job would completely change his approach. If you would earnestly seek God and make your supplication to the Almighty, if you were pure and upright, surely now he would awake for you and prosper your rightful dwelling place. Though your beginning was small, yet your latter end would increase abundantly. To prove his theological point conclusively, Bildad appealed directly to ancient wisdom. For inquire, please, of the former age, and consider the things discovered by their fathers. For we were born yesterday and know nothing, because our days on earth are a shadow. He genuinely believed that the ancestors had completely figured out how God works, and their accumulated wisdom was far more reliable than current personal experience. Bildad used incredibly vivid word pictures to make his point crystal clear. The godless person was like a plant that grows luxuriously in wet, marshy soil, but dies quickly when the hot sun comes out. While it is yet green and not cut down, it withers before any other plant. So are the paths of all who forget God, and the hope of the hypocrite shall perish, whose confidence shall be cut off, and whose trust is a spider's web. He painted another detailed picture of someone who trusts completely in his house, holding fast to it desperately, but having it collapse anyway when real pressure comes. But Bildad's final conclusion was genuinely meant to encourage and give hope. Behold, God will not cast away the blameless, nor will he uphold the evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughing, and your lips with rejoicing. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the dwelling place of the wicked will come to nothing. Job's response in chapters 9 and 10 showed clearly that his friend's simple, straightforward answers weren't helping him at all. He actually agreed with part of what Bildad had said. Truly I know it is so, but how can a man be righteous before God? The real problem wasn't that Job disagreed with God's perfect justice. The problem was that God was far too powerful for any human being to argue with successfully. Job painted an absolutely incredible picture of God's overwhelming power. He removes the mountains, and they do not know when he overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble. He commands the sun, and it does not rise. He seals off the stars. He alone spreads out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. God's creative power was completely beyond human imagination. He made the bear, Orion and the Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. He does great things past finding out, yes, wonders without number. If he goes by me, I do not see him. If he moves past, I do not perceive him. If he takes away, who can hinder him? Who can say to him, what are you doing? But this overwhelming power made Job feel completely helpless. Though I were righteous, I could not answer him. I would beg mercy of my judge. If I called and he answered me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. For he crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. Job's frustration grew exponentially as he imagined trying to argue his case. If it is a matter of strength, indeed he is strong. And if of justice, who will appoint my day in court? Though I were righteous, my own mouth would condemn me. Though I were blameless, it would prove me perverse. In chapter 10, Job decided to speak directly to God, despite the overwhelming odds. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Show me why you contend with me. Does it seem good to you that you should oppress, that you should despise the work of your hands, and smile on the counsel of the wicked? Job reminded God that he had made him. Your hands have made me and fashioned me, an intricate unity. Yet you would destroy me. The silence was broken by the harshest voice yet. Zophar the Naamathite had been listening to everything, and his patience had run out completely. Chapter 11 shows him speaking with no gentleness at all, cutting straight to what he believed was the heart of the problem. Should not the multitude of words be answered? And should a man full of talk be vindicated? Zophar wasn't going to dance around the issue like his friends had done. His attack was direct and brutal. For you have said, my doctrine is pure and I am clean in your eyes. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips against you, that he would show you the secrets of wisdom, for they would double your prudence. Know therefore that God exacts from you less than your iniquity deserves. In Zophar's mind, Job was getting off easy. His suffering wasn't too much, it was actually too little for whatever he had done wrong. Zophar painted a picture of God's infinite wisdom that made human understanding look foolish. Can you search out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limits of the Almighty? They are higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? Their measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. The implication was clear. Job couldn't possibly understand what God was doing, so he should stop complaining. Then Zophar delivered his diagnosis with surgical precision, for he knows deceitful men. He sees wickedness also. Will he not then consider it? For an empty-headed man will be wise when a wild donkey's colt is born a man. According to Zophar, Job was empty-headed, and God could see right through his pretense of righteousness. But Zophar also offered a way out, though it came wrapped in condemnation. If you would prepare your heart and stretch out your hands toward him, if iniquity were in your hand, and you put it far away, and would not let wickedness dwell in your tents, then surely you could lift up your face without spot. Yes, you could be steadfast and not fear. The solution was simple in Zophar's mind. Confess your hidden sins, and everything will be fine. He promised restoration if Job would just admit his guilt, because you would forget your misery and remember it as waters that have passed away, and your life would be brighter than noonday. Though you were dark, you would be like the morning, and you would be secure because there is hope. Yes, you would dig around you and take your rest in safety, but his final words carried a warning. But the eyes of the wicked will fail, and they shall not escape, and their hope, loss of life. Job had heard enough. Chapter 12 opens with words dripping with sarcasm that showed just how fed up he was with his friend's lectures. No doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. The bitterness in Job's voice was unmistakable. He was tired of being treated like a fool by people who thought they had all the answers. His frustration poured out as he described his situation. But I have understanding as well as you. I'm not inferior to you. Indeed, who does not know such things as these? I'm one mocked by his friends, who called on God and he answered him. The just and blameless who is ridiculed. Job pointed out the cruel irony. He was being mocked by the very people who should have been comforting him. Then Job made an observation that must have stung his friends. A lamp is despised in the thought of one who is at ease. It is made ready for those whose feet slip. The tents of robbers prosper, and those who provoke God are secure in what God provides by his hand. He was pointing out that their simple theology didn't match reality. Bad people often lived comfortable lives while good people suffered. Job then launched into a magnificent description of God's power that showed he understood divine sovereignty better than his accusers did. But now ask the beasts, and they will teach you, and the birds of the air, and they will tell you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, and the fish of the sea will explain to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? He continued with examples of God's absolute control over everything. With him are wisdom and strength. He has counsel and understanding. If he breaks a thing down, it cannot be rebuilt. If he imprisons a man, there can be no release. If he withholds the waters, they dry up. If he sends them out, they overwhelm the earth. Job was showing that he understood God's power perfectly well. That wasn't his problem. The real issue, Job explained, was that God seemed to use his power in ways that confused human understanding. He leads counselors away plundered and makes fools of the judges. He loosens the bonds of kings and binds their waist with a belt. He leads princes away plundered and overthrows the mighty. He deprives the trusted ones of speech and takes away the discernment of the elders. God's ways didn't follow the neat patterns his friends insisted they must follow. Job's point was devastating. He pours contempt on princes and disarms the mighty. He uncovers deep things out of darkness and brings the shadow of death to light. He makes nations great and destroys them, enlarges nations and guides them. If God operated this way with nations and kings, why did his friends think individual suffering always followed predictable rules? Chapter 13 shows Job making perhaps the most dangerous decision of his life. He had listened to his friends' theories long enough, and now he was ready to take his case directly to the highest court possible. Hold your peace, let me alone that I may speak, and let come on me what may. Job was essentially telling his friends to be quiet because he had something more important to do than listen to their lectures. His decision was breathtaking in its boldness. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Even so, I will defend my own ways before him. He also shall be my salvation. For a hypocrite could not come before him. Job was willing to risk everything, even his life, to get answers from God directly. He believed that his integrity would be his protection, because a truly wicked person wouldn't dare approach God this way. Job had prepared his case carefully. I have prepared my case. I know that I shall be vindicated. Who is he who will contend with me? If now I hold my tongue, I perish. He was confident that if he could just get a fair hearing, he would be proven right. The problem wasn't his guilt. The problem was that he couldn't get God to listen to him. Before presenting his case, Job made two requests that showed how desperate he was. "Only two things do not do to me. Then I will not hide myself from you. Withdraw your hand from me, and let not the dread of you make me afraid. Then call, and I will answer, or let me speak, then you respond to me." Job wanted God to stop hurting him long enough for them to have a conversation, and he wanted God to stop being so terrifying that Job couldn't think straight. His questions were heartbreaking in their honesty. "How many are my iniquities and sins? Make me know my transgression and my sin. Why do you hide your face and regard me as your enemy? Will you frighten a leaf driven to and fro? And will you pursue dry stubble?" Job genuinely didn't know what he had done wrong, and he felt like God was hunting him down, like he was some kind of dangerous criminal. The pain in Job's voice was unmistakable as he described his situation. "For you write bitter things against me, and make me inherit the iniquities of my youth. You put my feet in the stocks and watch closely all my paths. You set a limit for the soles of my feet." Job felt like he was in prison, with God as his jailer watching his every move and keeping detailed records of his failures. His final words in this chapter painted a picture of human frailty that explained why he needed mercy rather than judgment. Man decays like a rotten thing, like a garment that is moth-eaten. Job was pointing out that humans are naturally weak and temporary. They need compassion, not harsh treatment. Chapter 14 contains some of the most beautiful and heartbreaking poetry in the entire Bible, as Job reflected on the temporary nature of human life. His words painted pictures that anyone could understand. Man who is born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. He comes forth like a flower and fades away. He flees like a shadow and does not continue. Job was saying that human life is naturally brief and difficult, like a flower that blooms and quickly dies, or a shadow that appears and disappears. The comparison with trees was particularly striking. "For there is hope for a tree, if it is cut down, that it will sprout again, and that its tender shoots will not cease. Though its root may grow old in the earth, and its stump may die in the ground, yet at the scent of water it will bud and bring forth branches like a plant. Even a dead tree could come back to life if conditions were right. But humans were different. But man dies and is laid low. Indeed, man breathes his last, and where is he? As water disappears from the sea, and a river becomes parched and dries up, so man lies down and does not rise. Till the heavens are no more, they will not awake nor be roused from their sleep. Unlike trees, people don't get second chances. When they die, they stay dead." This reality made Job wish for something that seemed impossible. "Oh, that you would hide me in the grave, that you would conceal me until your wrath is past, that you would appoint me a set time and remember me. If a man dies, shall he live again? All the days of my hard service I will wait till my change comes." Job was actually wishing he could hide in death until God's anger passed, and then come back to life when things were better. The hope Job expressed was tentative but beautiful. "You shall call, and I will answer you. You shall desire the work of your hands. For now you number my steps, but do not watch over my sin. My transgression is sealed up in a bag, and you cover my iniquity." Job imagined God calling him back from death, like a friend calling to a friend, and God choosing not to remember his failures. But Job's hope was crushed by reality. But as a mountain falls and crumbles away, and as a rock is moved from its place, as water wears away stones, and as torrents wash away the soil of the earth, so you destroy the hope of man. You prevail forever against him, and he passes on. You change his countenance and send him away. Even the most solid things in nature eventually break down and disappear, and humans are far more fragile than mountains or rocks. Job's final words in this chapter were heartbreaking. His sons come to honor, but he does not know it. They are brought low, but he does not perceive it of them. But his flesh will be in pain over him, and his soul will mourn over him. Even if good things happened to his family after he died, Job would never know about it. Death was a permanent separation from everything he cared about. When Eliphaz spoke again in chapter 15, his gentle approach was completely gone. He had listened to Job's speeches and decided that kindness wasn't working. Should a wise man answer with empty knowledge and fill himself with the east wind? Should he reason with unprofitable talk, or by speeches with which he can do no good? Eliphaz was saying that Job's words were as empty and destructive as a hot desert wind. His accusation was serious and direct. Yes, you cast off fear and restrain prayer before God, for your mouth utters your iniquity, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you and not I. Your own lips testify against you. Eliphaz was claiming that Job's complaints were actually proving his guilt. By questioning God, Job was showing that he didn't truly fear the Lord. Eliphaz asked cutting questions designed to put Job in his place. Are you the first man who was born? Or were you made before the hills? Have you heard the counsel of God? Do you restrict wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not in us? He was tired of Job acting like he was wiser than his friends. Then Eliphaz played what he thought was his strongest card. Both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, much older than your father. Are the consolations of God too small for you, and the words spoken gently with you? He was reminding Job that older, wiser men had tried to help him, and Job had rejected their comfort. Eliphaz's description of wicked people was clearly meant to describe Job. The wicked man writhes with pain all his days, and the number of years is hidden from the oppressor. Dreadful sounds are in his ears. In prosperity the destroyer comes upon him. He does not believe that he will return from darkness, but a sword is waiting for him. The implication was obvious. Job's suffering proved he was wicked. In chapter 16, Job's response revealed how deeply his friends' words had wounded him. I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Shall words of wind have an end? Or what provokes you that you answer? I also could speak as you do, if your soul were in my soul's place. I could heap up words against you and shake my head at you. Job was pointing out that his friends were giving him the opposite of comfort. Job's description of what God was doing to him was violent and disturbing. He tears me in his wrath and hates me. He gnashes at me with his teeth. My adversary sharpens his gaze on me. They gape at me with their mouth. They strike me reproachfully on the cheek. They gather together against me. Job felt like God had become his enemy, attacking him with supernatural fury. The physical description of his suffering was heartbreaking. God has delivered me to the ungodly and turned me over to the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, but he has shattered me. He also has taken me by my neck and shaken me to pieces and set me up for his target. His archers surround me. He pierces my heart and does not pity. He pours out my gall on the ground. Job felt like God was using him for target practice, shooting arrows at him without mercy. Chapter 17 shows Job dealing with complete social rejection while clinging to a desperate hope. His description of his situation was pathetic. My spirit is broken. My days are extinguished. The graves are ready for me. Are not mockers with me? And does not my eye dwell on their provocation? Even his friends had become people who mocked him instead of helping him. Job felt completely isolated and misunderstood. He has made me a byword of the people, and I have become one before whom men spit. My eye has also grown dim because of sorrow, and all my members are like shadows. People were using his name as an example of someone cursed by God, and his physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. The reaction of righteous people to his situation made everything worse. Upright men are astonished at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the hypocrite. Yet the righteous will hold to his way, and he who has clean hands will be stronger and stronger. Good people looked at Job's suffering and assumed he must be a hypocrite, which made them more determined to live righteously themselves. But in the middle of his despair, Job made an incredible declaration of faith. but he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot has held fast to his steps. I have kept his way and not turned aside. Despite everything that was happening, Job maintained that God knew his true character and would eventually vindicate him. Job's hope was based on something beyond his current circumstances. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and my record is on high. My friends scorn me. My eyes pour out tears to God. Oh, that one might plead for a man with God, as a man pleads for his neighbor. Job believed that somewhere in heaven, there was a witness who knew the truth about his situation and would eventually speak up for him. This hope was precious to him because human help had failed. For when a few years are finished, I shall go the way of no return. My spirit is broken, my days are extinguished. The graves are ready for me. Job knew his time was running out, and if justice was going to come, it would have to come from heaven rather than earth. His final words in this section were filled with resignation about human friendship. But come back, all of you, and I shall not find one wise man among you. My days are past, my purposes are broken off, even the thoughts of my heart. Job had given up on getting help or understanding from the people around him. Bildad's second speech in chapter 18 was much shorter and much darker than his first attempt to help Job. He was clearly frustrated with Job's refusal to accept their explanations. How long till you put an end to words? Gain understanding, and afterward we will speak. Why are we counted as beasts and regarded as stupid in your sight? Bildad felt like Job was treating them like animals instead of wise counselors. His entire speech was basically one long, detailed description of what happens to wicked people, and the implication was clear. This was what was happening to Job. Indeed, the light of the wicked goes out, and the flame of his fire does not shine. The light is dark in his tent, and his lamp beside him is put out. Bildad was saying that Job's prosperity had ended because he was wicked. The imagery Bildad used was vivid and frightening. The steps of his strength are shortened, and his own counsel casts him down, for he is cast into a net by his own feet, and he walks into a snare. The net takes him by the heel, and a snare lays hold of him. A noose is hidden for him on the ground, and a trap for him in the road. According to Bildad, wicked people become trapped by their own evil schemes. Bildad's description became even more dramatic. Terrors frighten him on every side and drive him to his feet. His strength is starved, and destruction is ready at his side. It devours patches of his skin. The firstborn of death devours his limbs. The firstborn of death was probably a reference to the most terrible kind of disease, which certainly seemed to fit Job's condition. The social consequences Bildad described were devastating. He is driven from light into darkness and chased out of the world. He shall have neither son nor posterity among his people, nor any remaining in his dwellings. Those in the west are astonished at his day, as those in the east are frightened. Bildad was saying that wicked people lose their families and are remembered only as examples of divine judgment. Job's response in chapter 19 began with pure exasperation. How long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words? These 10 times you have reproached me. You are not ashamed that you have wronged me. Job had reached his limit with his friends' accusations. They were supposed to be comforting him, but instead they were making his pain worse. Job felt completely abandoned by everyone. He has removed my brothers far from me, and my acquaintances are completely estranged from me. My relatives have failed, and my close friends have forgotten me. Those who dwell in my house and my maidservants count me as a stranger. I am an alien in their sight. Even his own household staff were treating him like a stranger. The physical revulsion people felt toward him was humiliating. My breath is offensive to my wife, and I am repulsive to the children of my own body. Even young children despise me. I arise, and they speak against me. All my close friends abhor me, and those whom I love have turned against me. Job had become physically disgusting to everyone around him, including his own family. But then Job made one of the most famous declarations in the entire Bible. "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. How my heart yearns within me!" Even when everything else had failed, Job maintained his faith that God would eventually vindicate him, even if it took a resurrection from the dead to make it happen. Zophar's final speech in chapter 20 was his attempt to solve the problem that Job had raised about wicked people prospering. His solution was simple: their prosperity doesn't last. Do you not know this of old, since man was placed on earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite is but for a moment? According to Zophar, what looked like success for evil people was just a temporary illusion. Zophar painted a picture of sudden reversal. Though his haughtiness mounts up to the heavens, and his head reaches to the clouds, yet he will perish forever like his own refuse. Those who have seen him will say, "Where is he?" He will fly away like a dream and not be found. Yes, he will be chased away like a vision of the night. Evil people might seem successful for a while, but they would disappear as quickly as dreams. The description of divine judgment was graphic. The increase of his house will depart, and his goods will flow away in the day of his wrath. This is the portion from God for a wicked man, the heritage appointed to him by God. Zophar was confident that God always punished wickedness, even if it took time. Job's response in chapter 21 was devastating to his friend's entire theological system. He asked them to really listen to him for once. "Listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your consolation. Bear with me that I may speak, and after I have spoken, keep mocking." Job was about to present evidence that would destroy their simple explanations. His observations about wicked people were based on reality, not theory. Why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, become mighty in power. Their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Job had watched evil people live long, successful lives while good people suffered. The prosperity of the wicked was undeniable. Their bull breeds without failure, their cow-calves without miscarriage. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They sing to the tambourine and harp, and rejoice to the sound of the flute. Evil people often had healthy families, successful businesses, and happy lives. Most shocking of all, they lived this way while completely rejecting God. They spend their days in wealth and in a moment go down to the grave. Yet they say to God, "Depart from us, for we do not desire the knowledge of your ways." What is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we have if we pray to him? These people openly defied God and still prospered. Job's final challenge to his friends was unanswerable. How often is the lamp of the wicked put out? How often does their destruction come upon them, the sorrows God distributes in his anger? They are like straw before the wind, and like chaff that a storm carries away. Job was asking for evidence that wicked people actually get punished regularly, and his friends couldn't provide it. The conclusion was inescapable. "In truth, I know it is so, but how can a man be righteous before God?" Job's friends' theology simply didn't match the world as it actually worked. Their simple formulas about good people prospering and evil people suffering were contradicted by daily observation. The theological debates had gone on long enough. Eliphaz the Temanite decided it was time to stop speaking in generalities and make specific accusations. Chapter 22 shows him abandoning all pretense of gentleness as he launched into direct charges against Job's character. Can a man be profitable to God, though he who is wise may be profitable to himself? Is it any pleasure to the Almighty that you are righteous? Or is it gain to him that you make your ways blameless? Eliphaz was suggesting that God had no reason to protect Job unless Job was truly serving him properly. His logic was brutal in its simplicity. Is not your wickedness great, and your iniquity without end? Since Job was suffering so severely, his sins must be enormous. But Eliphaz didn't stop with general accusations. He got very specific about what those sins must have been. The charges he brought were serious crimes against basic human decency, for you have taken pledges from your brother for no reason and stripped the naked of their clothing. You have not given the weary water to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. Eliphaz was accusing Job of being cruel to people who desperately needed help, taking their clothes as payment for debts and refusing to give food and water to those who were dying of hunger and thirst. The accusations grew even more damaging. But the mighty man possessed the land, and the honorable man dwelt in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the strength of the fatherless was crushed. According to Eliphaz, Job had used his wealth and power to hurt the most vulnerable people in society. Widows who had no one to protect them, and orphans who had no parents to care for them. These sins, Eliphaz claimed, explained everything that had happened. Therefore snares are all around you, and sudden fear troubles you, or darkness so that you cannot see, and an abundance of water covers you. Job's current suffering was simply the inevitable result of his secret cruelty to the poor and helpless. But Eliphaz offered one final chance for redemption. Now acquaint yourself with him and be at peace. Thereby good will come to you. Receive, please, instruction from his mouth and lay up his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be built up. You will remove iniquity far from your tents. The solution was straightforward. Confess these hidden sins, repent genuinely, and God would restore everything. The promised restoration was magnificent. Then you will lay your gold in the dust, and the gold of Ophir among the stones of the brooks. Yes, the Almighty will be your gold and your precious silver. For then you will have your delight in the Almighty, and lift up your face to God. According to Eliphaz, Job would become so blessed that he wouldn't even care about material wealth anymore. Eliphaz painted a picture of complete divine favor. You will make your prayer to him. He will hear you, and you will pay your vows. You will also declare a thing, and it will be established for you. So light will shine on your ways. When they cast down and you say, exaltation will come, and then he will save the humble person. Everything Job said would come true, and he would have the power to help other people who were in trouble. Job's response in chapters 23 and 24 revealed the depth of his spiritual crisis. He wasn't rejecting his friend's advice because he was stubborn. He was rejecting it because he genuinely couldn't find God to repent to. Even today my complaint is bitter. My hand is listless because of my groaning. Job's suffering had reached the point where he could barely function physically. His deepest desire was simple, but seemed impossible. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come to his seat. I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. Job wasn't afraid of facing God. He was desperate to find him. He believed that if he could just get a fair hearing, everything would be cleared up. Job was confident about what would happen in that divine courtroom. There the upright could reason with him, and I would be delivered forever from my judge. He wasn't asking for mercy based on God's kindness. He was asking for justice based on his actual innocence. But God seemed to be deliberately hiding from him. Look, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. When he works on the left hand, I cannot behold him. When he turns to the right hand, I cannot see him. No matter which direction Job looked, God was nowhere to be found. This game of divine hide-and-seek was driving Job to desperation, but it hadn't destroyed his faith. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot is held fast to his steps. I have kept his way and not turned aside. I have not departed from the commandment of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. Job maintained that his life had been characterized by careful obedience to God's commands. Yet, this very God who knew Job's righteousness had become terrifying, but he is unique, and who can make him change? And whatever his soul desires that he does. For he performs what is appointed for me, and many such things are with him. Therefore I am terrified at his presence. When I consider this, I'm afraid of him. Job was caught between his confidence in his innocence and his terror of God's absolute power. In chapter 24, Job turned his attention to the broader problem of injustice in the world. If his friend's theology was correct, why was evil so common and unpunished? Since times are not hidden from the Almighty, why do those who know him see not his days? If God was in control and always punished evil, why didn't good people see evidence of his justice? Job painted vivid pictures of the crimes that went unpunished every day. Some remove landmarks, they seize flocks violently and feed on them. They drive away the donkey of the fatherless. They take the widow's ox as a pledge. People were stealing land, taking animals from those who couldn't defend themselves, and cheating widows and orphans. The exploitation of the poor was systematic and cruel. They push the needy off the road. All the poor of the land are forced to hide. Indeed, like wild donkeys in the desert, they go out to their work, searching for food. The wilderness yields food for them and for their children. They gather their fodder in the field and glean in the vineyard of the wicked. Poor people were being pushed out of society entirely, forced to live like wild animals just to survive. The working conditions were horrific. They cause the poor to go naked without clothing, and they take away the sheaves from the hungry. They press out oil within their walls and tread wine presses, yet suffer thirst. People were working to produce food and clothing, but weren't allowed to have any for themselves. Even worse crimes happened under cover of darkness. The murderer rises with the light. He kills the poor and needy, and in the night he is like a thief. The eye of the adulterer waits for the twilight, saying, "No eye will see me," and he disguises his face. Murderers and adulterers operated openly, confident they would never face consequences. Job's conclusion was devastating to his friend's theology. They are on the face of the waters. Their portion is cursed in the earth, so that no one turns into the way of their vineyards. As drought and heat consume the snow waters, so the grave consumes those who have sinned. Even when evil people eventually died, they often lived long, successful lives before that happened. By chapter 25, Bildad the Shuhite had apparently run out of arguments. His third speech was remarkably short, only 6 verses compared to his earlier lengthy presentations. It seemed like he was grasping for something, anything, to say that might still support the friend's position. Dominion and fear belong to him. He makes peace in his high places. Bildad was trying to emphasize God's absolute authority, as if that alone settled all questions. His main point was humanity's complete insignificance before God. How then can man be righteous before God? Or how can he be clean who is born of a woman? Look even to the moon, and it does not shine. Yes, the stars are not pure in his sight. How much less man who is a maggot, and a son of man who is a worm? Bildad's argument had been reduced to calling humans worms and maggots. This was a pathetic ending to what had started as confident theological instruction. Bildad had begun with elaborate explanations based on ancient wisdom, but now he could only point out that humans are worthless compared to God. It wasn't really an answer to Job's questions. It was an admission that the friends didn't have answers. Job's response in chapter 26 was magnificent and devastating. He began with sarcasm that showed just how unimpressed he was with Bildad's final effort. How have you helped him who is without power? How have you saved the arm that has no strength? How have you counseled one who has no wisdom? And how have you declared sound advice to many? Job was pointing out that Bildad's words had provided no help, strength, wisdom, or good advice. Then Job proceeded to demonstrate that he understood God's power far better than his friend did. The dead tremble, those under the waters and those inhabiting them. Sheol is naked before him, and destruction has no covering. God's power reached even into the realm of the dead. where human understanding couldn't go. Job's description of divine power was breathtaking in its scope. He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. He binds up the water in his thick clouds, yet the clouds are not broken under it. He covers the face of his throne and spreads his cloud over it. God controlled the very structure of creation, holding the earth in space and managing the weather systems. The boundaries God established were absolute. He drew a circular horizon on the face of the waters, at the boundary of light and darkness. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his rebuke. God had set limits that even the most powerful forces in creation couldn't cross. Job's conclusion showed that human understanding of God's power was necessarily limited. Indeed, these are the mere edges of his ways, and how small a whisper we hear of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand? Everything humans could observe about God was just the tiniest hint of his true power, like hearing a whisper when the reality was thunder. This wasn't the speech of someone who didn't understand God's greatness. Job knew exactly how powerful God was, which made his questions even more urgent, not less important. Chapter 27 shows Job making one of the most solemn declarations possible. He began with an oath that invoked the very God who seemed to be opposing him. As God lives, who has taken away my justice, and the Almighty, who has made my soul bitter, as long as my breath is in me, and the breath of God in my nostrils, my lips will not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit. Job was swearing by God's own life that he would continue telling the truth, even though God appeared to be treating him unjustly. This oath was essentially Job's final answer to his friends' demands that he confess hidden sins. Far be it from me that I should say you are right. Till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. My righteousness I hold fast and will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me as long as I live. Job was willing to die rather than lie about his character. His integrity was more important to him than getting relief from his suffering. But Job wasn't content to just defend his own innocence. He turned the tables on his friends completely. May my enemy be like the wicked, and he who rises up against me like the unrighteous. Job was essentially saying that anyone who opposed him was in the wrong, including his three friends. Then Job did something unexpected. He began describing what happens to wicked people, but he did it in a way that seemed to agree with his friends' theology. For what is the hope of the hypocrite, though he may gain much, if God takes away his soul? Will God hear his cry when trouble comes upon him? Job seemed to be accepting that wicked people do eventually get punished. His description of divine judgment was detailed and frightening. Will he delight himself in the Almighty? Will he always call on God? I will teach you about the hand of God. What is with the Almighty I will not conceal. Surely all of you have seen it. Why then do you behave with complete nonsense? Job was claiming that his friends had seen evidence of God's judgment, but were drawing the wrong conclusions from it. The fate of the wicked man's family was particularly tragic. If his children are multiplied, it is for the sword, and his offspring shall not be satisfied with bread. Those who survive him shall be buried in death, and their widows shall not weep. Even if evil people had large families, those families would eventually be destroyed. Their wealth would be temporary. Though he heaps up silver like dust and piles up clothing like clay, he may pile it up, but the just will wear it, and the innocent will divide the silver. Everything wicked people accumulated would eventually go to righteous people. The destruction would be sudden and complete. He builds his house like a moth, like a booth which a watchman makes. The rich man will lie down, but not be gathered up. He opens his eyes, and he is no more. Terrors overtake him like a flood. A tempest steals him away in the night. All their security would prove to be as fragile as a moth's cocoon. Job's final words in this chapter were ominous. The east wind carries him away, and he is gone. It sweeps him out of his place. It hurls against him and does not spare. He flees desperately from its power. Men shall clap their hands at him and shall hiss him out of his place. When the wicked finally fell, people would be glad to see them go. The implication was clear. If Job had been truly wicked, all this would have happened to him already. The fact that he was still maintaining his integrity proved his innocence. Chapter 28 is one of the most beautiful poems in the entire Bible. It comes like a peaceful interlude after all the heated arguments. And it seems to be Job's meditation on a question that had been underlying everything. Where can true wisdom be found? The chapter begins with observations about human skill in mining and technology. Surely there is a vein for the silver and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth and copper is smelted from ore. Job marveled at human ingenuity in finding hidden treasures. Man puts an end to darkness and searches every recess for ore in the darkness and the shadow of death. He breaks open a shaft away from people. In places forgotten by feet, they hang far away from men. They swing to and fro. Miners would go to incredible lengths, risking their lives in dark, dangerous places to find valuable metals. The search for precious things led people to places where no living creature had ever been. He puts his hand on the flint. He overturns the mountains at the roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees every precious thing. He dams up the streams from trickling. What is hidden he brings forth to light. Human determination could literally move mountains and redirect rivers in the search for treasure. But Job pointed out that there was something far more valuable than gold or silver that couldn't be found through human effort. But where can wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. Real wisdom, the kind that could answer the deep questions of life, wasn't hidden in the ground waiting to be dug up. The search for wisdom was frustrating because it couldn't be bought. The deep says it is not in me, and the sea says it is not with me. It cannot be purchased for gold, nor can silver be weighed for its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or sapphire. Even the deepest parts of the earth and sea claimed they didn't contain wisdom, and no amount of money could buy it. Job listed the most valuable things humans knew about, but none of them could purchase wisdom. No mention shall be made of coral or quartz, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. All the treasures people fought, wars over, and spent their lives pursuing were worthless. Compared to true wisdom, the mystery deepened. When Job considered that even death didn't reveal wisdom's location, destruction and death say, "We have heard a report about it with our ears." God understands its way, and he knows its place. Only God knew where wisdom could actually be found. God's perspective was completely different from the human perspective, for he looks to the ends of the earth and sees under the whole heavens to establish a weight for the wind and apportion the waters by measure. When he made a law for the rain and a pathway for the thunderbolt, God's wisdom was displayed in the very structure of creation. He had designed the weather patterns and natural laws that kept the world functioning. The revelation of wisdom's true location was simple but profound. Then he saw wisdom and declared it. He prepared it, indeed he searched it out. And to man he said, "Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding." True. Wisdom wasn't hidden in some secret place. It was available to anyone who would fear God and avoid evil. This poem seemed to be Job's way of stepping back from all the arguments and reminding everyone what really mattered. His friends thought they were wise because they had theories about how God worked. But real wisdom was much simpler and much more practical. Chapter 29 shows Job taking a break from defending himself to remember what his life had been like before disaster struck. His memories were painful because they highlighted how much he had lost. "Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness. Job remembered a time when he felt God's protection and guidance in his life. Those had been days of prosperity and promise. Just as I was in the days of my prime, when the friendly counsel of God was over my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were around me, when my steps were bathed with cream and the rock poured out rivers of oil for me. Everything had been going perfectly. His family was intact. His business was incredibly successful, and he felt close to God. Job's social position had been impressive and respected. When I went out to the gate by the city, when I took my seat in the open square, the young men saw me and hid, and the aged arose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and put their hand over their mouth. The voice of nobles was hushed, and their tongue stuck to the roof of their mouth. Even the most powerful people in the city had shown him deference and respect. The reason for this respect became clear as Job described how he had used his influence. Because I delivered the poor who cried out, the fatherless and the one who had no helper. The blessing of a perishing man came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. Job's reputation had been built on his kindness to those who couldn't help themselves. His commitment to justice had been complete. I put on righteousness and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind, and I was feet to the lame. I was a father to the poor, and I searched out the case that I did not know. Job hadn't just helped people occasionally, he had made justice and righteousness his daily clothing, and he had actively sought out people who needed help. He had even stood up to powerful people who were hurting others. I broke the fangs of the wicked and plucked the victim from his teeth. Job had used his wealth and influence to protect vulnerable people from those who would take advantage of them. In those days, Job had expected to live a long, successful life. Then I said, I shall die in my nest and multiply my days as the sand. My roots are spread out to the waters, and the dew lies all night on my branch. My glory is fresh within me, and my bow is renewed in my hand. He had felt like a tree planted by water, strong, growing, and permanent. People had valued his opinion and waited to hear what he would say. Men listened to me and waited and kept silence for my counsel. After my words they did not speak again, and my speech settled on them as dew. They waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouth wide as for the spring rain. Job's words had been like refreshing rain to people who were thirsty for wisdom and guidance. His presence had brought comfort and hope to others. I chose the way for them and sat as chief. So I dwelt as a king in the army, as one who comforts mourners. Job had been a leader who brought comfort to people who were grieving and direction to people who were confused. The contrast between Job's past glory and his current humiliation was devastating. Chapter 30 begins with Job describing how the social order had completely reversed. But now they mock at me, men younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to put with the dogs of my flock. People who had once respected Job now openly mocked him, including young men whose fathers Job wouldn't have considered good enough to work as shepherds. These weren't respectable people who had turned against him. They were society's outcasts. Indeed, they were so worthless that they were driven out from among men. They shouted at them as at a thief. They had to live in the clefts of the valleys, in caves of the earth and the rocks. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they nestled. The people mocking Job were homeless vagrants who lived like animals and were chased away from civilized society. Their character was as low as their social status. They were sons of fools, yes, sons of vile men. They were scourged from the land, and now I am their taunting song. Yes, I am their byword. They abhor me, they keep far from me. They do not hesitate to spit in my face. Job had become entertainment for the lowest people in society. They made up songs about him and treated him with complete contempt. The physical attacks were humiliating. Because he has loosed my bowstring and afflicted me, they have cast off restraint before me. At my right hand the rabble arises. They push away my feet, and they raise against me their ways of destruction. They break up my path. They promote my calamity. They have no helper. Job felt like God had removed his protection, and now even worthless people felt free to attack him. The assault felt like warfare. They come as broad breakers. Under the ruinous storm they roll along. Terrors are turned upon me. They pursue my honor on the wind, and my welfare passes away like a cloud. Job's reputation and prosperity had disappeared as quickly as clouds blown away by a storm. The emotional and spiritual pain was as bad as the physical suffering. And now my soul is poured out because of my plight. The days of affliction take hold of me. My bones are pierced in me at night, and my gnawing pains take no rest. By great force my garment is disfigured. It binds me about as the collar of my coat. Job felt like he was being torn apart from the inside, and even his clothes had become uncomfortable on his diseased skin. Job felt like God had thrown him away like garbage. He has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry out to you, but you do not answer me. I stand up, and you regard me, but you have become cruel to me. With the strength of your hand, you oppose me. The God who had once protected and blessed Job now seemed to be actively fighting against him. Job felt like he was being carried away to destruction. You lift me up to the wind and cause me to ride on it. You spoil my success. For I know that you will bring me to death, and to the house appointed for all living. Job believed that God was deliberately destroying him, and that death was the inevitable result. The cruelest part was that Job had always helped others in similar situations. Surely he would not stretch out his hand against a heap of ruins if they cry out when he destroys. Have I not wept for him who was in trouble? Has not my soul grieved for the poor? Job had always been compassionate toward people who were suffering, so why wasn't he receiving the same compassion? The disappointment was overwhelming. When I looked for good, evil came to me. And when I waited for light, darkness came. My heart is in turmoil and cannot rest. Days of affliction confront me. I go about mourning, but not in the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry out for help, instead of the good things Job had expected from his righteous life. He had received only evil and darkness. His physical condition made him an outcast. My skin grows black and falls from me. My bones burn with fever. My harp is turned to mourning, and my flute to the voice of those who weep. Even his musical instruments could only produce sad sounds that matched his grief. Chapter 31 contains Job's final and most comprehensive defense of his character. This wasn't just a general claim of innocence. It was a detailed oath covering every area of moral behavior. Job began with sexual purity. I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? For what is the allotment of God from above, and the inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Job had made a deliberate decision to control even his thoughts about women, because he believed God would judge sexual sin. His standard for honesty was absolute. If I have walked with falsehood, or if my foot has hastened to deceit, let me be weighed on honest scales, that God may know my integrity. Job was willing to have God examine every aspect of his life to prove his truthfulness. He continued with his treatment of others. If my step has turned from the way, or my heart walked after my eyes, or if any spot adheres to my hands, then let me sow and another eat. Yes, let my harvest be rooted out. If Job had been dishonest in any way, he was willing to lose everything he had worked for. The oath covered adultery specifically. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind for another, and let others bow down over her. For that would be wickedness. Yes, it would be iniquity deserving of judgment. Job understood that adultery wasn't just a private sin. It would destroy families and communities. His treatment of servants revealed his character. If I have despised the cause of my male or female servant when they complained against me, what then shall I do when God rises up? When he punishes, how shall I answer him? Did not he who made me in the womb make him? Did not the same one fashion us in the womb? Job had treated his servants fairly because he understood that God had created all people equally. His care for the poor had been extensive. If I have kept the poor from their desire, or caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or eaten my morsel by myself, so that the fatherless could not eat of it, but from my youth I grew up with him as with a father, and from my mother's womb I guided the widow. Job had shared his resources with those in need from the time he was young. He had provided practical help to those who needed it. If I have seen anyone perish for lack of clothing, or any poor man without covering, if his heart has not blessed me, and if he was not warmed with the fleece of my sheep. Job had made sure that people had adequate clothing, especially during cold weather. His attitude toward wealth was healthy. If I have made gold my hope, or said to find gold, you are my confidence. If I have rejoiced because my wealth was great, and because my hand had gained much. Job hadn't put his trust in money or become proud because of his prosperity. He had avoided idolatry completely. If I have observed the sun when it shines, or the moon walking in brightness, so that my heart has been secretly enticed, and my mouth has kissed my hand, this also would be an iniquity deserving of judgment, for I would have denied God who is above. Job had never been tempted to worship the sun, moon, or stars like some of his neighbors did. His attitude toward his enemies was generous. If I have rejoiced at the destruction of him who hated me, or lifted myself up when evil found him, indeed I have not allowed my mouth to sin by asking for a curse on his soul. Job hadn't celebrated when bad things happened to people who didn't like him, and he had never cursed anyone. His hospitality was famous. If the men of my tent have not said, who is there that has not been satisfied with his meat? But no sojourner had to lodge in the street. For I have opened my doors to the traveler. Job's household was known for feeding anyone who was hungry and providing shelter to travelers. He had never tried to hide his sins. If I have covered my transgressions as Adam, by hiding my iniquity in my bosom, because I feared the great multitude, and dreaded the contempt of families, so that I kept silence and did not go out of the door. When Job had done something wrong, he had been honest about it instead of trying to cover it up. His final challenge was bold. Oh, that I had one to hear me. Here is my mark. Oh, that the Almighty would answer me, that my prosecutor had written a book. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it on me like a crown. I would declare to him the number of my steps. Like a prince I would approach him. Job was so confident in his integrity that he wanted God to write down all the charges against him so he could answer them publicly. A fourth voice suddenly broke into the conversation. Chapter 32 introduces Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite, who had been listening to everything with growing frustration. So these three men ceased answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. Then the wrath of Elihu, the son of Barachel the Buzite, of the family of Ram, was aroused against Job. His wrath was aroused because he justified himself, rather than God. This young man was angry at Job for seeming to put his own righteousness above God's, but Elihu was equally angry at the three friends. Also against his three friends his wrath was aroused, because they had found no answer, and yet had condemned Job. They had accused Job without being able to prove their case, which made God look bad in the process. Elihu had waited respectfully for his elders to finish speaking. Now, because they were years older than he, Elihu had waited to speak to Job. When Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, his wrath was aroused. Age was supposed to bring wisdom, but these older men had failed completely. His frustration poured out as he explained why he finally decided to speak. I am young in years, and you are very old. Therefore I was afraid and dared not declare my opinion to you. I said, age should speak, and multitude of years should teach wisdom. But there is a spirit in man, and the breath of the Almighty gives him understanding. Elihu believed that wisdom came from God, not just from getting older. He had been bursting to speak. For I am full of words. The spirit within me compels me. Indeed, my belly is like wine that has no vent. It is ready to burst like new wineskins. Elihu felt like he would explode if he didn't get to share what God had shown him. His approach would be different from the others. I will speak, that I may find relief. I will open my lips and answer. Let me not, I pray, show partiality to anyone, nor let me flatter any man, for I do not know how to flatter, else my Maker would soon take me away. Elihu promised to be completely honest, without favoritism toward anyone. In chapters 33 and 34, Elihu began teaching about how God actually communicates with people. His message was that God was constantly trying to reach humans, but they often missed his messages. Surely God speaks once, yes, twice, yet man does not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men, while slumbering on their beds, then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction. God used dreams and visions to teach people important lessons. The purpose of this communication was protective. In order to turn man from his deed and conceal pride from man, he keeps back his soul from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. God was trying to save people from making mistakes that would destroy them. Elihu also taught that suffering itself was a form of divine communication. Man is also chastened with pain on his bed and with strong pain in many of his bones, so that his life abhors bread and his soul succulent food. His flesh wastes away from sight, and his bones stick out, which once were not seen. Sometimes God used physical pain to get people's attention, but even in suffering, God provided help. If there is a messenger for him, a mediator, one among 1,000, to show man his uprightness, then he is gracious to him and says, "Deliver him from going down to the pit. I have found a ransom." God would send someone to help explain what he was doing and provide a way of escape. In chapter 34, Elihu addressed the question of God's justice directly. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should commit iniquity. For he repays man according to his work, and makes man to find a reward according to his way. Elihu insisted that God was always perfectly fair in his dealings with people. His logic was simple. Surely God will never do wickedly, nor will the Almighty pervert justice. Who gave him charge over the earth? Or who appointed him over the whole world? Since God owned everything and answered to no one, he had no reason to be unfair or corrupt. Chapters 35 and 36 show Elihu explaining that God was so great that human actions couldn't really affect him. Look to the heavens and see, and behold the clouds, they are higher than you. If you sin, what do you accomplish against him? Or if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do to him? God was too high and mighty to be hurt by human failures. Similarly, human goodness didn't make God richer. If you are righteous, what do you give him? Or what does he receive from your hand? Your wickedness affects a man such as you, and your righteousness a son of man. People's actions affected other people, but they didn't change God's essential nature. This didn't mean God didn't care about justice. Because of the multitude of oppressions, they cry out. They cry out for help because of the arm of the mighty. But no one says, "Where is God my Maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth, and makes us wiser than the birds of heaven?" God heard when people were being mistreated, but he wanted them to turn to him for help. In chapter 36, Elihu painted a picture of God's perfect justice in action. Behold, God is mighty, but despises no one. He is mighty in strength of understanding. He does not preserve the life of the wicked, but gives justice to the oppressed. God used his power to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. God's way of dealing with righteous people was completely different. He does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous, but they are on the throne with kings, for he has seated them forever, and they are exalted. God watched over good people and eventually gave them positions of honor and authority. When righteous people did suffer, It was always for a purpose, and if they are bound in fetters, held in the cords of affliction, then he tells them their work and their transgressions, that they have acted defiantly. He also opens their ear to instruction and commands that they turn from iniquity. Suffering was God's way of teaching important lessons. Chapter 37 shows Elihu pointing to the approaching thunderstorm as evidence of God's awesome power. At this also my heart trembles and leaps from its place. Hear attentively the thunder of his voice and the rumbling that comes from his mouth. He sends it forth under the whole heaven, his lightning to the ends of the earth. After it a voice roars. He thunders with his majestic voice, and he does not restrain them when his voice is heard. The storm was like God's voice speaking to the world. Elihu described God's control over weather patterns. God thunders marvelously with his voice. He does great things which we cannot comprehend. For he says to the snow, "Fall on the earth." Likewise to the gentle rain and the heavy rain of his strength. God commanded every snowflake and raindrop. The storm served multiple purposes. He seals the hand of every man, that all men may know his work. The beasts go into dens and remain in their lairs. From the chamber of the south comes the whirlwind, and cold from the scattering winds of the north. And weather reminded both people and animals that God was in control of everything. Elihu marveled at God's creative power. By the breath of God ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen. Also with moisture he saturates the thick clouds. He scatters his bright clouds. And they swirl about, being turned by his guidance, that they may do whatever he commands them on the face of the whole earth. Every cloud and weather pattern followed God's directions perfectly. As the storm grew more intense, Elihu pointed out human limitations. Listen to this, O Job. Stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. Do you know when God dispatches them and causes the light of his cloud to shine? Do you know how the clouds are balanced, those wondrous works of him who is perfect in knowledge? Humans couldn't even understand how clouds stayed in the sky, much less control them. The storm was building toward something magnificent, and now men cannot look at the light when it is bright in the skies, when the wind has passed and cleared them. He comes from the north as golden splendor. With God is awesome majesty. As for the Almighty, we cannot find him. He is excellent in power, in judgment and abundant justice. He does not oppress. Therefore men fear him. He shows no partiality to any who are wise of heart. Then it happened. Chapter 38 records the moment everyone had been waiting for. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. God finally broke his silence. But his first words weren't what anyone expected. Who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you and you shall answer me. Instead of answering Job's questions, God began asking his own questions about creation. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? God's questions came rapid fire, covering every aspect of the natural world. Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth and issued from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band? When I fixed my limit for it and set bars and doors? When I said, this far you may, come but no farther, and here your proud waves must stop. The interrogation continued with questions about light and darkness. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? God was pointing out that Job had never controlled even basic things like sunrise. Chapter 39 focused on wild animals that no human could control. Do you know the time when the wild mountain goats bear young? Or can you mark when the deer gives birth? Can you number the months that they fulfill? Or do you know the time when they bear young? God had designed intricate systems for animal reproduction that worked perfectly without human help. The wild donkey was completely independent. Who set the wild donkey free? Who loosed the bonds of the onager, whose home I have made the wilderness, and the barren land his dwelling? He scorns the tumult of the city, he does not heed the shouts of the driver. And this animal lived exactly the life God had planned for it. God asked about the mighty ox. Will the wild ox be willing to serve you? Will he bed by your manger? Can you bind the wild ox in the furrow with ropes? Or will he plow the valleys behind you? Some animals were simply too powerful for humans to control, no matter how hard they tried. Chapter 40 begins with God giving Job a chance to respond. Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, "Shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? He who rebukes God, let him answer it." This was Job's opportunity to defend his complaints against God. Job's first response was humble and brief. Then Job answered the Lord and said, "Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further." The cosmic interrogation had shown Job how little he actually understood about God's ways. But God wasn't finished. His second speech began with an even more direct challenge. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Now, prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you indeed annul my judgment? Would you condemn me that you may be justified?" God was asking Job directly whether he thought he could do a better job of running the universe. God challenged Job to try taking over. Have you an arm like God? Or can you thunder with a voice like his? Then adorn yourself with majesty and splendor, and array yourself with glory and beauty. Disperse the rage of your wrath. Look on everyone who is proud, and humble him. If Job thought he could do better, let him try controlling proud and evil people. Then God introduced Job to Behemoth. "Look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now, his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit." This was a creature of incredible size and strength that God had created. Behemoth's power was awesome. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword. This animal was so mighty that only God could control it. The creature was completely fearless. Surely the mountains yield food for him, and all the beasts of the field play there. He lies under the lotus trees in a covert of reeds and marsh. The lotus trees cover him with their shade. The willows by the brook surround him. Indeed, the river may rage, yet he is not disturbed. He is confident, though the Jordan gushes into his mouth. Even flooding rivers couldn't frighten this magnificent beast. Chapter 41 introduced an even more impressive creature, Leviathan. God's description began with a challenge. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook, or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Can you put a reed through his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? This sea monster was completely beyond human ability to capture or control. God asked sarcastically whether Job could make Leviathan into a pet. Will he make many supplications to you? Will he speak softly to you? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him as a servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you leash him for your maidens? The idea of taming this creature was ridiculous. The monster's physical defenses were impenetrable. Who can remove his outer coat? Who can approach him with a double bridle? Who can open the doors of his face with his terrible teeth all around? His rows of scales are his pride, shut up tightly. As with a seal, one is so near another that no air can come between them. Leviathan was like a living fortress. Even the bravest warriors couldn't fight this creature. The sword that reaches him cannot avail, nor does spear, dart, or javelin. He regards iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Slingstones become like stubble to him. Darts are regarded as straw. He laughs at the threat of javelins. Human weapons were completely useless against Leviathan. The creature's very presence was terrifying. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights, sparks of fire shoot out, smoke goes out of his nostrils as from a boiling pot, and burning rushes. Leviathan breathed fire like a dragon. God's final point was devastating. On earth there is nothing like him which is made without fear. He beholds every high thing. He is king over all the children of pride. If Job couldn't handle one creature that God had made, how could he question God's management of the entire universe? Chapter 42 shows Job's complete surrender to God's wisdom. Then Job answered the Lord and said, "I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You asked, 'Who is this who hides counsel without knowledge?' Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know." Job admitted that he had been talking about things beyond his understanding. His repentance was genuine and complete. "Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, 'I will question you, and you shall answer me.' I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I abhor myself, and repent in dust and ashes." Meeting God directly had changed everything for Job. Then God turned his attention to the three friends. And so it was, after the Lord had spoken these words to Job, that the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, "My wrath is aroused against you and your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." The friends who thought they were defending God had actually been misrepresenting him. God's instructions for them were humbling. "Now therefore, take for yourselves 7 bulls and 7 rams. Go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering. And my servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept him, lest I deal with you according to your folly, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." They had to ask Job to intercede for them with God. The friends obeyed, and Job prayed for them despite everything they had put him through. Then came the restoration, and the Lord restored Job's losses when he prayed for his friends. Indeed, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. God's blessing returned in double measure. Job's prosperity became legendary. Now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. For he had 14,000 sheep, 28,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. His wealth was exactly double what it had been originally. His family was restored too. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he called the name of the first Jemimah, the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Keren Hapuch. In all the land were found no women so beautiful as the daughters of Job, and their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. His new daughters were famous for their beauty and received equal treatment with their brothers. Job lived to see multiple generations. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his children and grandchildren for 4 generations. So Job died old and full of days. God gave him a long life to enjoy his restored blessings and see his family grow. If this journey through Job's story opened your eyes to something new, hit that subscribe button and join our community of seekers who aren't afraid to ask the hard questions. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their pain has a purpose, that their questions matter to God, and that restoration is possible even when everything seems lost. The book of Job proves that honest wrestling with God isn't rebellion, it's relationship. And sometimes the most profound answers come not in explanations, but in encounters with the Almighty Himself. Don't let this revelation end here. Subscribe, share, and keep seeking.